You know, there's a quiet that feels peaceful, and there's a quiet that feels fragile. Like you're holding your breath without even realizing it. This morning, this quiet, this is the peaceful kind. The cup of tea steams in my hands, a tiny, warm anchor. The sunlight slants through the window, and I can actually feel its warmth on my skin. It's a simple thing, right? But for me, for a long, long time, this kind of simple peace felt like an impossible dream. A fantasy. My name is Amanda. And for what felt like an eternity, I wasn't Amanda. I was a ghost. A haunted, hollowed-out version of the woman I used to be. I was haunted by a betrayal that, it didn't just break my heart. It rewired my soul. What happened to me didn't leave any physical scars, but it left me with a diagnosis I never, ever saw coming. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder. CPTSD. To understand just how far I fell, you have to see the height I was living at before. You have to see the fortress I called my life. I met Robert in the autumn of my 38th year. It was a time of my life that felt hopeful, but also a little fragile. I'd had my share of relationships, you know? The kind that feel like you're just temporarily renting a space in someone else's life. But Robert felt like coming home. A home I'd built with my own two hands. He wasn't just a partner, he was my sanctuary. He had this calmness that just settled my chronic, low-grade anxiety. And his laugh, it felt like a genuine, unexpected gift. We built this life that felt sacred. Our own private universe with its own laws of physics, and the primary force, the gravity that held it all together, was trust. He was the architect of my safety. He knew everything. The silly childhood stories, the big professional ambitions, and the deep, festering wound from my father's abandonment when I was 12. That old pain had made me build walls, high ones. But for Robert, I willingly dismantled them. Brick by careful brick. He handled my heart with such reverence. I can still hear his voice, a murmur in the dark as we fell asleep. You're my person, Amanda. I've never felt this kind of connection. It's you and me against the world. And I believed him. I built my entire emotional world inside the fortress of that promise. Our life was this intricate tapestry of shared details. We had a joint savings account for that house with a garden we'd dream about. We owned a small but charming apartment, both our names right there on the deed. We even started a little investment portfolio together. He was always the more financially savvy one. And I trusted him. Completely. After my father left, financial security was this terrifyingly elusive concept for my mother and me. With Robert, I finally felt safe. He managed it all, assuring me it was his way of caring for us, for our future. And I let him. I handed over that part of my power, and I felt grateful for it. But the betrayal, it didn't begin with some dramatic confession or a caught-in-the-act moment. No. It began with 1,000 tiny silences. A slow, insidious poison seeping into the foundation of my fortress. It was his phone, you know? Once left casually on the coffee table, now always face down or clutched in his palm like a state secret. It was the new yoga class on Thursday nights that made him evasive, almost irritated, when I'd ask how it was. It was fine, babe. Just yoga. And the way his scent changed, just subtly. A different shampoo, a faint, unfamiliar perfume on his jacket that he'd blame on a colleague at work. When I'd voice my unease, my voice all shaky, a flicker of fear in my eyes, he'd masterfully turn it around. His voice would be laced with this gentle, patronizing concern. Babe, you seem really stressed lately. Is everything okay at work? You know you can talk to me. He'd pull me into a hug, his heartbeat steady against my ear, and I'd feel this wave of shame wash over me. He was so calm. So convincing. He made my intuition feel like a mental illness. I later learned the term for this, gaslighting. It's a form of psychological manipulation that systematically dismantles your perception of reality. And let me tell you, it is a special kind of hell. You start to doubt your own senses, your own mind. The day the fortress was revealed to be a house of cards, it started with a mundane errand. I was making a grocery list. Our shared laptop was open on the kitchen table. A notification popped up, an email from a woman named Chloe. The subject line, it was a lyric from our song. The one he'd sung to me on a beach in Greece, the one he said would always be, forever, our anthem. My heart didn't just sink. It ceased to be. The world just narrowed to that glowing screen. With hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, cold and clumsy, I clicked. And what I found, it wasn't a single email. It was a 2-year-long parallel life. 2 years. The entire time he was calling me his person, he was building a world with her. The emails were devastatingly intimate. He shared the poetry I thought he wrote for me, with her. He discussed our private struggles, my grief over a miscarriage, my fears about aging, my deepest insecurities, as fodder for their conversations. He was her confidant, her lover, her soulmate, all while lying next to me in our bed. But the true evisceration, the moment that truly unmade me, was yet to come. As I scrolled, numb and hyperventilating, my vision blurry, I found emails about finances. PDF attachments of documents I barely recognized. And then, a thread with his lawyer. My eyes, fighting to comprehend the legalese, slowly pieced together the unthinkable. The investment portfolio was gone. Liquidated. The money, our money, the money I had worked for and saved, was transferred into an account in his name only. Then, I saw it. An email from 3 months prior, from Robert to Chloe, with the subject, "For our future." The body of the email was just a few lines. "The final transfer is done, my love. The apartment is next. It's all for us. For our new beginning." He had not just stolen my heart, he had methodically, cold-heartedly, stolen my security. He was in the process of transferring the ownership of our apartment, the home I loved, the one we bought together, into his sole name, with the apparent intent of giving it to her. A sound ripped from my throat then, a guttural, animalistic wail of pure agony that I did not recognize as my own. The world didn't go black, it shattered. Into a million jagged, glittering shards of pain, each one reflecting a different lie. The weeks and months that followed, they were a descent into a waking nightmare. You see it in movies, right? The betrayed woman is sad but strong, throwing clothes out of a window in this cathartic, powerful purge. My reality was a profound psychological collapse. It was ugly. It was terrifying. The first and most relentless symptom was hypervigilance. My body became a prison on high alert. Sleep. That became a foreign country I could no longer visit. I would lie in the dark, every single cell in my body screaming, my heart a frantic, trapped bird beating against my ribs. The sound of a car door shutting outside would send a jolt of pure adrenaline through my system. Was it him? Was he coming back? My startle response was so exaggerated, if a pot clanged in the kitchen, I would literally jump and shriek. My nervous system was a raw, exposed wire, sparking and flailing with no off switch. Then came the intrusive thoughts and the flashbacks. And these weren't mere memories. They were full sensory, violent assaults. I could be in the middle of buying groceries, staring at a carton of milk, and suddenly, I was back in front of that laptop, the words "for our future" burning into my retinas. I could smell his cologne, feel the cold kitchen tile under my feet. My mind would conjure these vivid, unwelcome movies of him with Chloe, built from the devastating details of their emails, of him handing her the keys to my home, of them laughing over the financial documents that had bled me dry. These flashbacks would hit me like a physical blow, leaving me dizzy, nauseous, and completely disoriented. I'd have to pull my car over because I'd forget where I was going. I became a master of avoidance. I stopped seeing our mutual friends. Their pity was a heavy blanket I couldn't breathe under, and their well-meaning questions. "Have you heard from him? Are you dating yet?" They were emotional landmines. I couldn't listen to music, couldn't watch films, couldn't even walk past the Italian restaurant that had been our place. The world had become a museum of my own betrayal. I quit my job as a graphic designer because my concentration was just shot. I'd sit at my desk and simply leave my body. I'd be staring at the screen, and then it was like I was floating near the ceiling, looking down at this shell of a woman. This sensation, I later learned, is called dissociation. Derealization. A feeling that you are outside yourself, watching your life as a movie, and that the world around you is unreal. It is a profoundly terrifying and isolating experience. You feel utterly, completely insane. And the isolation, that was the most crushing weight. From the outside, I looked fine. I wasn't a soldier back from war with visible wounds. I was just a woman in her 40s who'd been cheated on. Just leave him, people would say, their advice so simple it was insulting. You're better off. You'll find someone else. They couldn't grasp that my trauma wasn't about losing a man. It was about the total annihilation of my reality. The person I trusted most had been my predator. My home was the crime scene. My future had been stolen and gifted to another woman. My sense of safety, trust, and self had been murdered. After 6 months of this relentless internal torture, of days spent curled on the floor unable to move, a dear friend, Anna, who's a nurse, intervened. She came over, saw the hollow ghost I had become, and took my icy hands in hers. Amanda, she said, her voice firm but so kind, this is not a broken heart. This is trauma. Your nervous system is injured. You need professional help. You need to see someone who understands PTSD. It was the first time anyone had given a name to my hell that felt accurate. She helped me find a therapist, Dr. Lona Evans, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. Sitting in her soft, neutral-toned office for the first time, I spilled my shattered story, not just the affair, but the financial evisceration, the systematic dismantling of my life. I wept until I was empty, until I was just a raw nerve. Dr. Evans listened, not with dramatic pity, but with a calm, focused empathy. When I finished, utterly spent, she looked at me and said the words that became my first lifeline. Amanda, what you are experiencing is a normal, neurobiological response to an abnormal, deeply traumatic event. You have been subjected to profound betrayal trauma, and your symptoms are consistent with complex PTSD. You are not going crazy. You are injured. And we can treat this. Hearing that, it was like being thrown a rope in a bottomless pit. I was injured. An injury could be healed. My journey back to myself was not a sprint, it was a slow, arduous, and often painful climb out of a very dark hole. But for the first time, I was moving. Dr. Evans became my Sherpa, guiding me through the treacherous terrain of my own mind. She explained that trauma gets stuck in the primitive, emotional part of the brain, the amygdala, bypassing the rational, thinking prefrontal cortex. My job was to build a bridge between them, to teach my brain that the danger was in the past. The first, most foundational tool she gave me was breathwork. It sounded absurdly simple, almost insulting. How could breathing fix this gaping wound? But she explained the science. When you're trapped in a panic attack or a flashback, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which just fuels the amygdala's fight or flight response. She taught me the 4-7-8 technique. Inhale quietly through the nose for 4 counts, hold the breath for 7 counts, and exhale slowly through the mouth for 8 counts. This physically stimulates the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, and it sends a direct signal to the amygdala. You are safe, right here, right now. It was my emergency brake. A tool I could use anywhere, anytime the world started to spin. And in the beginning, the world spun a lot. Next was journaling. But this was not a Dear Diary exercise. Dr. Evans prescribed 2 specific therapeutic types. The first was a trigger log. I kept a small notebook with me at all times. Whenever I felt a surge of panic, a flashback, or a wave of debilitating anxiety, I would force myself to write. The trigger, what just happened? The sensation, what did I feel in my body? The emotion, what was the primary feeling? The memory, what specific memory or thought was attached? This practice, it objectified the experience. It transformed the mysterious, terrifying monster of my PTSD into a series of data points I could observe and analyze. It gave me a sense of agency, even when it was just the agency to write it down. The second type was expressive writing. For 15 to 20 minutes each day, I had to write continuously about my deepest thoughts and feelings regarding the trauma. The rules were, write without stopping, don't worry about grammar or spelling, and let it all out: the rage, the sadness, the violent thoughts, the profound grief. The first few times, I was a sobbing, snotty mess, the pen shaking in my hand. But over time, it was like lancing a poisoned wound. Getting the chaotic, toxic thoughts out of my head and onto the page, it drained them of their power. The story began to become just that, a story, not a living entity possessing me. Once I had these coping mechanisms in place, Dr. Evans introduced the more challenging work, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. This was where I had to confront and dismantle the distorted beliefs the trauma had cemented in my mind. My core beliefs were, I am unlovable and worthless, I am stupid and cannot trust my own judgment, and the world is a profoundly dangerous and malicious place. We would take one belief, like I am stupid, and she would have me act like a detective, examining the evidence for and against it. For instance, evidence for, I trusted Robert completely. I didn't see the signs. I let him handle all the finances. Evidence against, I built a successful career. I am capable of learning complex software. Robert deliberately and manipulatively gaslit me. He exploited my trust, which is a reflection of his character, not my intelligence. Many intelligent people are deceived by skilled manipulators. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to challenge these automatic negative thoughts. It was mental weightlifting, and it was exhaustingly difficult, but I could feel the weak, corrupted structures in my mind being reinforced with sturdier, truthful beams. But the most challenging, yet most transformative, part of my therapy was EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Healing, I learned, could not be confined to the therapist's office. My body had been the silent, terrified vessel for all this pain, and I had to make peace with it. My body felt like the enemy, the site of the panic attacks, the insomnia, the constant, coiled tension. Anna, my nurse friend, gently dragged me to a yoga class. The first time, during a quiet, restorative pose, as the instructor guided us to scan the body for sensation, I was flooded with a profound grief and started to cry silently on the mat. The instructor, a wise woman with kind eyes, simply placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "It's okay. Just breathe. Let it move through you." And that's what yoga taught me, to breathe into physical and emotional discomfort, to observe sensations without judgment. It began to repair the connection between my mind and body, a connection that trauma had violently severed. I also began the practice of walking in nature. This wasn't just exercise, it was a deliberate practice. I'd leave my phone behind and walk in a nearby park, consciously engaging my 5 senses. I would feel the rough bark of an oak tree, smell the petrichor after a rain, listen to the complex symphony of birds and wind, watch the dance of light and shadow through the leaves. Nature was indifferent to my suffering in the most healing way possible. It didn't rush, it didn't judge, it just was. In those moments, my frantic nervous system found a rhythm it could sync with, a rhythm of ancient, slow, steady growth. My nutrition had also suffered terribly. I was either forgetting to eat or subsisting on bread and coffee, which only amplified my anxiety and fatigue. I saw a nutritionist who emphasized the gut-brain connection. She explained that a healthy gut microbiome is crucial for producing neurotransmitters like serotonin. We worked on incorporating anti-inflammatory foods, omega-3s, probiotics, and complex carbs. I cut way back on sugar and caffeine. It wasn't a magic bullet, but it provided my body and brain with the fundamental building blocks they desperately needed to repair themselves. Finally, I had to conquer the night. PTSD had turned sleep into a terrifying battlefield. Dr. Evans helped me implement strict sleep hygiene, no screens for an hour before bed, a cool, dark room, using the bed only for sleep, and a consistent bedtime ritual, herbal tea, gentle stretching, a moment of gratitude. It was a struggle, but gradually, sleep began to shift from a state I feared to a state of genuine restoration. Now, reintegrating into work and social life, that was its own mountain to climb. My first attempt at returning to work, just part-time, was a humbling disaster. The office environment was overwhelming. The fluorescent lights felt aggressive. The sound of keyboards clicking was like gunfire. A colleague's loud laugh from across the room would send me into a tailspin. I had a major panic attack in the bathroom after my new, well-meaning boss asked me a simple question about a project timeline. My mind went completely blank. I dissociated. I had to go home. It felt like a massive failure. But this time, instead of spiraling into shame, I used my tools. I talked to Dr. Evans about it. We role-played conversations. I started with even smaller steps. I'd work from a coffee shop for an hour, just to be around people. Then 2 hours. I practiced having short, low-stakes conversations with baristas. I told my boss about my health issues and asked if I could wear noise-canceling headphones for a while. These small victories, getting through a 2-hour work session without a flashback, having a coherent conversation with a colleague, felt like winning Olympic gold. They were proof I was healing. Socially, it was just as hard. The first time Anna convinced me to go to a small gathering, I spent most of the night hovering near the food table, my smile feeling like a cracked mask. I'd rehearsed answers to questions about my life. I'm taking some time for myself. I'm exploring new career paths. But when someone asked, "So, what happened with you and Robert?" it was like a trapdoor opened beneath me. I stammered something and fled to the bathroom to do my 4-7-8 breathing. I felt like a social freak. But again, small victories. I started by seeing one friend at a time, for a short, defined period. I learned it was okay to say, I'm not really up for talking about that right now. I started to recognize the look of genuine care in people's eyes, and I learned to distinguish it from the look of morbid curiosity. I slowly, carefully, began to rebuild my social circle, one authentic, understanding person at a time. An essential part of this whole process was discovering the concept of post-traumatic growth. This is the idea that people who endure psychological struggles can often experience positive growth and profound change as a result. I was determined not just to survive, but to find meaning in the suffering. I began to consciously rediscover who Amanda was, separate from Robert's victim. I signed up for a pottery class. It was messy, frustrating, and wonderfully tactile. My first vase was lopsided and collapsed in on itself, much like I had felt. But I kept going. The clay was mine to shape. No one could take that from me. I worked on setting firm, healthy boundaries in all my relationships. I learned to say no without a long, guilt-ridden explanation. I learned to articulate my needs clearly. I need some quiet time now. I can't talk about this. This was a direct reclaiming of the power Robert had stolen. Perhaps the most revolutionary practice was self-compassion. Dr. Evans had me practice this daily. Instead of berating myself for having a bad day or a flashback, I learned to talk to myself as I would a dear, suffering friend. I would place a hand on my heart and say, "This is a moment of suffering, Amanda. It's okay. You've been through so much. It's normal to feel this way. Be gentle with yourself." This simple act of turning kindness inward was a balm to the deep wounds of shame and self-blame. The final, and most difficult, stage was forgiveness. And I need to be unequivocally clear here, forgiving Robert did not mean condoning his actions, reconciling with him, or dropping the long, grueling legal battle to reclaim my financial assets. Forgiveness was a gift I gave exclusively to myself. It was the conscious, deliberate decision to release the corrosive poison of anger and resentment that was still binding me to him. I wrote him a long, detailed letter that I never sent. I poured every ounce of my pain, rage, and grief onto the pages. And at the end, I wrote, "I forgive you for not being the man you promised to be. I forgive you for your weakness, your cruelty, and your deceit. I release you from my heart. I set myself free." And after many, many tears, I meant it. I took that letter out into my backyard, and I burned it in a little metal bowl. I watched the smoke carry the poison away. So, I am not the woman I was before the betrayal. That woman, with her open, unguarded heart and innocent trust, is gone. And I allow myself to mourn for her sometimes. But I am also not the shattered, terrified ghost of the aftermath. I am new. I am a woman who has stared into the abyss of human cruelty and not let it consume her. I am a woman who built a ladder out of that darkness, rung by rung, using the tools of therapy, the strength of friendship, the power of self-compassion, and my own relentless, fiery will to live and to heal. The financial damage took years to legally untangle, and I never recovered everything. But I recovered enough. I live in a smaller apartment now, one that is entirely, unquestionably mine. My trust is no longer naive, it is a conscious choice I extend to people who demonstrate their trustworthiness over time. My intuition, which Robert worked so hard to gaslight out of me, is now my most trusted guide, honed and sharpened by the fire. The Japanese have an art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with lacquer mixed with gold, silver, or platinum. The breaks are not hidden, they are highlighted, becoming the most beautiful part of the object's history. That is what I have become. The cracks in my soul have been filled with gold, the gold of resilience, of hard-won wisdom, of a deeper, more authentic empathy for the suffering of others. If you are in the thick of your own trauma right now, if you feel broken beyond repair, if you're lying on the floor and you can't see a way out, please hear the echo of my story. You are not crazy. You are injured. And you can heal. Your path will be unique, but it exists. Start with a single breath. Just one. Then find one person, one resource, one therapist. Take one tiny, trembling step. Your story is not over. This new life of mine, this quiet morning with a cup of tea and a peaceful heart, is proof that after the long, brutal night of trauma, there can be a dawn. And I promise you, it is a dawn worth fighting for.